What's good? It's Woog. We have Saul Canelo Alvarez, 58 wins, 2 losses, and 2 draws, defending his WBA, WBC, IBF, and WBO 168-pound titles against John Ryder, 32 wins and 5 losses. And just looking at the records, you forget how much fighting Canelo has done in like the past 16 or so years. Like, he might only be 32 years old, but the guy's got over 60 professional fights. And so, like in the UFC, I don't consider Max Holloway's actual age to reflect his fighting age when you consider the 5-round fights that he has been in. Well, when you consider Canelo's career and the fact that he's been fighting now at an elite level for over 10 years, you can see why the concern, or at least, the perception in looking at Canelo's career going forward, or at least at this juncture, is like like, people are really wondering, like, okay, is this the cliff where he starts noticeably declining? And I've even heard a few major voices in boxing media suggest, and not even suggest, but say almost matter-of-factly that he is showing some level of degradation. And I'm like, wait a second. Okay, what a difference 1 or 2 fights makes. Because before the Dimitri Bivol fight, the idea was that Canelo's probably going to beat Dimitri Bivol. I know a lot of people were saying, wait a second, not so fast. But if you look at the betting odds, when in doubt, look at what the betting odds were, and you'll see what the public perception is, even within the boxing community. It was that Canelo's probably going to beat Dimitri Bivol, and then at a point he can pivot and then take on Artur Beterbiev to collect those other belts. Like, that's where we had Canelo placed in our minds in terms of what he was about to do. Not at 168 anymore, because yes, there was always the unfinished business with David Benavidez, but what he was likely to do at 175. So don't forget that when we now look at Canelo just 2 fights later, after the unanimous decision loss against Dimitri Bivol and then the unanimous decision win over Triple G in their trilogy fight, don't forget where we were about 1 year ago in terms of what we thought of Canelo and what he was about to do, especially given what he had just done in that foray at 168. And it's crazy, with Canelo's career, he's now entering that stratosphere where you could break his career up into big segments, like careers within a career. You could do the same with Manny Pacquiao. You could do the same with Floyd Mayweather Jr. You could do the same with Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali. You can break their career up in a way, like if you were to break Canelo's career up into everything up to the fights with Gennady Golovkin, and then everything after, even if you break it up like that, and you could break it up into like a couple more segments, because that pre-Golovkin part of his career could be broken up into multiple segments. But you can break his career up in a way where he literally has multiple Hall of Fame careers within his career. There aren't too many fighters that you could say that about. Now, in this latest chapter of his career, in the decision loss against Dimitri Bivol and the decision win against Triple G, there are reasons to be a little bit skeptical, or at least have concerns about where he is relative to where he's been in terms of his overall abilities. But if you look a little bit closer at that, Dimitri Bivol fight, Dimitri Bivol he had been a very underrated fighter, and he was just, shining as a WBA 175-pound champ for a few years leading up to that fight with Canelo. But Dimitri Bivol is just an all-around beast, and you look at the matchup issues, especially when you consider the types of fighters besides Triple G that had been giving Canelo problems in the past. Erislandy Lara, obviously Floyd Mayweather Jr., and Austin Trout, right? The movers, the sweet science, very technical fighters. And granted, Canelo has beaten very technical fighters throughout his career as well. He beat Billy Joe Saunders by stoppage. He also stopped Caleb Plant, right? And at that time that he stopped Caleb Plant, that's when we thought, yeah, he might conquer the 175-pound division because of his showings at 168. But when you look at Dimitri Bivol's skill set, not to mention that he's like 6 feet, 6'1", Canelo's about 5'8"-ish, this was a very bad matchup. But, if Canelo handles business against John Ryder, I would advise him to take that David Benavidez fight, defend against David Benavidez, whose name has never been hotter. He was the boogeyman of the division, if you will. And, that fight would do crazy business. that fight might do better business than a rematch between Dimitri Bivol and Canelo Alvarez. But, Canelo's a very prideful person, and he just seems hell-bent on wanting that opportunity to right that wrong. And so if he does choose that over David Benavidez, well, then the next question is, okay, who's going to win that negotiation in terms of what division the fight takes place in? Canelo insists that he does it again at 175. Dimitri Bivol's like saying, no. I think he recently said, I only want that fight if we do it in his division next at 168. But, since then, it sounds like they can't get the Dimitri Bivol-Artur Beterbiev fight together, which I would have imagined would have been kind of like a bargaining chip on the Dimitri Bivol side, basically suggesting, hey, I've got other options, even though everybody knows that the biggest option is Canelo. But at least dressing it up where you've got other options. Well, now, if that fight between Bivol and Beterbiev is not in the immediate plans, that almost sounds like the only option for Dimitri Bivol, unless he's just going to take on the next mandatory title challenger, which is, who is that at this point? Joshua Buatsi? But it sounds like Dimitri Bivol more than likely would acquiesce if Canelo wants Dimitri Bivol after this Canelo versus John Ryder fight. But, before we get there, is Canelo going to beat John Ryder, or is the writing on the wall in terms of what Canelo's career is going to look like from the present to the future? Well, I think that the short answer is, if Canelo is still even nearly as sharp as he was a year ago, a year and a half ago, and if his hand is healed, I don't think that John Ryder has much of a chance here. Look, he's a pretty good fighter. He's a southpaw. Most people thought that he beat Callum Smith when Callum Smith was still an undefeated WBA champion. John Ryder looked really good in that fight, which is a little bit amazing that John Ryder finds himself here at this stage of his career, at this stage of his life, right? Because, 30 fights into his career, he was like 26-4. He had lost 4. He lost to Billy Joe Saunders way back in like 2013. He lost via decision to Jack Arnfield. Not to mention he lost a split decision to Rocky Fielding. Remember what Canelo did with Rocky Fielding? John Ryder lost to that guy. But then John Ryder went on a pretty good win streak, and then he had that controversial loss to Callum Smith, and it was totally like a Callum Smith type of an event, Like Callum Smith was one of the biggest blue chippers on Matchroom, and this is when DAZN was really just starting to get off the ground. And since John Ryder kind of built his name or further solidified his reputation with that controversial unanimous decision loss to Callum Smith, he then went on another 4-fight win streak. The third and fourth of those wins came against Daniel Jacobs in a fight that many thought that Daniel Jacobs deserved the decision win. But even if you thought Jacobs won, you would probably agree that in those middle and a few of the late rounds, John Ryder was visibly hurting Daniel Jacobs, who also looked exhausted and was having huge moments in that fight. And it wasn't just the crowd noise. I thought John Ryder fought really well in the second half after the first half of the fight was almost all Daniel Jacobs. Not that he was putting a significant beating on John Ryder, but he was just controlling the range and winning the rounds. Well, John Ryder doesn't have to worry about, the height dynamic that he faced against Daniel Jacobs or against Zach Parker in his next fight, which was a very disappointing injury stoppage in the 5th round. Zach Parker, I think, hurt his hand, and a lot of people didn't like how Zach Parker reacted to the injury, almost as if, they wanted to see Zach Parker demonstratively distraught and upset that his opportunity at becoming the mandatory was now gone because he was having to retire from that fight due to the injury against John Ryder. So those are John Ryder's last 2 wins. But in that fight against Zach Parker, even though it was stopped due to injury, it's not like Zach Parker was winning that fight. Like, look, I don't know if John Ryder was noticeably winning the fight, but Zach Parker sure didn't seem to be. Like, he was really patient from the outside, just really picking his spots where John Ryder seemed like he was the one igniting effective exchanges, where if there was anything meaningful that was landing, it seemed like it was coming from John Ryder, especially to the body. And that's another thing about Ryder. Southpaw, and he likes to mix up the attack low and high. So what does all this mean for Canelo? And what does it mean for John Ryder's likelihood of beating or even hanging with Canelo? Well, this is going to be the first time in a while that Canelo is fighting somebody even nearly his height. Like, Triple G would be the last one who was, under 6 feet tall. Well, I guess Billy Joe Saunders is technically like 5'11", right? But John Ryder is more like 5'8", 5'9", about Canelo's height. So in my mind, I'm actually kind of hearkening back to the Canelo Alvarez versus Liam Smith fight that was down at 154, and Canelo ended up stopping Liam Smith to the body, like in the middle rounds. Or it was the 9th round, but Liam Smith was taking a beating in the middle rounds and was just stopped in the 9th round. But their styles are a bit different. And again, John Ryder's a southpaw, Liam Smith's not. But just in terms of how they control range and how their style of controlling range, I don't think is going to mean much when it comes to how Canelo controls the pace and the flow of activity. First of all, if you come in head over heels like James Kirkland did, well, you saw what Canelo did to James Kirkland. And in recent years, people who are otherwise more bull in a china shop, think Avni Yildirim, are just stuck to the outside, relegated to eating Canelo's punches and jabs until they get finished. Can Canelo tame John Ryder to that degree? I don't think so. I think John Ryder's going to have more moments than Avni Yildirim did, but it's kind of hard to picture John Ryder winning rounds, winning more than like one round against Canelo. Like maybe the first round and then maybe another round if Canelo wins like rounds 2 through 4 or 5. And then takes a round off because maybe he dropped John Ryder but was unable to finish him. So you know how Canelo is. He won't just jump on you after hurting. Well, sometimes he will, but he's a pretty patient fighter where he's able to set traps and he kind of dictates the terms of the exchanges. And he, especially in recent years, has become low volume but super high efficiency where, yes, he's picking his shots, but boy, he's picking the hell out of those shots. So I think that it's possible that Canelo beats up John Ryder to a degree in the early rounds, but doesn't get him out of there. So then he basically, you know how Canelo tires in moments, sometimes takes a minute or a half a round off, sometimes more or less. I could see John Ryder winning a round like that if he's durable enough to survive some early to mid round heavy punches from Canelo. But outside of that, I think it's going to be John Ryder trying to change levels, but very tepid because of what entering the pocket and coming in with some heat means in terms of how Canelo's going to counter that. John Ryder's not going to be able to fight Canelo like he fought Daniel Jacobs. The consequences are just so much more dire when you're entering like that against Canelo. And John Ryder is very hittable. He's not that elusive, even though I do think that he's gotten a lot better defensively, you know, since that lost to Rocky Fielding. Basically, over the past 5 to 6 years, you've seen noticeable improvement in John Ryder's overall game. Like he's improved tremendously, but he's still not on the level of Canelo. And I think that this is a type of opponent that Canelo needs to get some rounds in. Like John Ryder's not the type who you're going to finish early. I mean, if Canelo does, I mean, props to him. I don't think that it's likely. So Canelo will get some work in. He'll be able to build trust in his injured hand, in his repaired hand. He can reestablish his timing, because remember how good his timing was around the time of, you know, the fight against Callum Smith, the fight against Billy Joe Saunders, and even before that, the fight against Daniel Jacobs, and in that second fight against Triple G. Like that was the best of Canelo. This last few chapters has been incredible, in my opinion, for Canelo. And again, this is one Hall of Fame career within a larger Hall of Fame career. So there are a lot of things, attributes that John Ryder brings to the table that kind of makes us an ideal opponent for Canelo. I don't think John Ryder is going to win the fight. Now, will Canelo stop John Ryder? I've been erring on the side of no. I think that John Ryder can go the distance. You know, I mean, it depends on how easily Canelo's able to find him and how effective John Ryder's style of pressure is. If Canelo's able to stop him at the gates, right, and keep him on the outside eating jabs, then it's pretty much Canelo's world to then march John Ryder down. And if that's the case, yes, I think he could finish John Ryder, maybe to the body if he starts punishing him bad enough. Like, I think that it's more likely that he finishes him and beats on him to the body than it is that he kind of just clean clocks him like he did Kirk Franklin or James Franklin. James Kirk Franklin. Wow. If you got that reference, okay. But I don't think Canelo's going to knock John Ryder out in the way that he did James Kirkland. I think that John Ryder is going to take some nice shots. I think that it's going to be one of those where Canelo's starting to get his timing down, kind of get back into the flow to where, on the instant replays between rounds, they're going to show like a nice, clean right hand that lands for Canelo. Just those like one or two highlights that they show between rounds. Canelo, I expect to be up on the cards. Like if this enters an 8th round, I expect Canelo to be up like 6 rounds to 1, maybe 5 rounds to 2. But what kind of fight is John Ryder gonna fight? Is he gonna go out on his shield, so to speak, or is he gonna take the money and basically say, okay, I gave it my shot in this spot, it's not working out for me. Let's make it through these 12 rounds. Because I suspect that if John Ryder loses to Canelo here, that I don't see him scaling the mountain again. I don't think he's going to get back in the top 10 contender trenches and want to battle it out with the other best and the baddest of the division. I almost feel like when guys fight Canelo, it's almost a similar effect to some of the guys who are fighting Floyd Mayweather, where when they get the outsized paycheck, I mean, they've been grinding and grinding. Think like Robert the Ghost Guerrero, Marcos Maidana, Victor Ortiz, some of these guys, like when they fight Floyd Mayweather, it's almost like they make this crazy money, and then the appetite for destruction and to take pain and to take punishment, it just decreases because you're pretty much set for life now. And this was the dream. A lot of them wanted to be champs in different capacities, and some achieved that, but you fight to earn this money, and now you're a multi-millionaire. And so what is the incentive to then put your hard hat back on, get back in the gym, and to grind as if you were poor again? I mean, some people are able to do it. Floyd Mayweather was able to do it throughout his career, put that hard hat back on and to stay disciplined. That's one of the things that made him special. Canelo, same thing. He fought hungrier than his opponents, and he was the rich one. So is John Ryder going to keep his foot on the gas and basically say, you're going to have to take me out because you're not going to be able to coast to a decision? That's tough to tell, but you know what? I'm gonna say that Canelo returns here with a knockout. Look, if he ends up winning this one via decision, I feel like that's almost gonna compound the downswing in the narratives around Canelo. Like, not only did he lose to Dimitri Bivol and go the distance with Triple G, which, I mean, who's ever stopped Triple G? They say it like it's a bad thing that he won like 9 rounds to 3 or 8 rounds to 4 against Gennady Golovkin. Even 40-year-old Gennady Golovkin is gonna beat, I think that today he would probably still beat Janibek Alimkhanuly. I think Triple G beats Janibek today. I don't know if we'll ever see Triple G in the ring again, but I think that highly of Triple G. So yeah, I'm not buying the degradation as much as others are suggesting, even though, damn, 62 professional fights, that's a lot of wear and tear on the body. But I'm gonna go with Canelo stopping John Ryder in like rounds 8 through 10, somewhere in there. I'm going Canelo via stoppage. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on Canelo Alvarez versus John Ryder. Who wins the fight and how? And what do you expect to happen in the aftermath of this fight? Do you think Canelo will, surprise us? Like, I think most of us want to see Canelo versus Benavidez more than we want to see the rematch of Bivol and Canelo, right? I do. I know I do. Let me know which one you would rather see. I think that most of us think and expect Bivol to win the rematch against Canelo. But damn, can you imagine if Canelo pulls it off in the rematch? That's just another one of those legacy feathers in the cap. But most of us don't expect that to happen, which again, just shows you how much we are prisoners to recency, right? Because again, before the fight against Bivol, it's like, yeah, Canelo's gonna fight Bivol. In fact, some people were like, oh, you're fighting Bivol? Like that wasn't a tough opponent. You guys might not remember this, but there were actually people complaining about Canelo picking Bivol. Like some people were saying, oh, cherry pick. Like, yeah, he's going to go up and pick the safe Dimitri Bivol and capture that 175-pound title. But yeah, let me know what you think about Canelo versus John Ryder. Who wins this fight and how? And what do you want to see happen after that? What do you expect to see happen after that? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And by the way, if Canelo versus Bivol happens, where do you think it will take place? Is Canelo going to win out and make this happen at 175? Or will Dimitri Bivol's wishes be granted and it happen at 168 for all of Canelo's belts if Canelo, again, handles business here against Ryder? Thanks for tuning in.